Time. Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Cody Felger, and joining me as always, the great Julian Rosen. Julian, how you doing, man?
I've been good. Football season winding down. Obviously, there's a little more time to relax, watch a little college basketball and whatnot. But we are kicking right back into the NFL. Free agency is upon us. This is kind of the first precursor, and it officially starts, I believe, in 2 days on the 13th.
Yes, I believe at 4 p.m. is when they can technically sign.
Yep, and so this is the time of year where the NFL starts ramping up again, and it's exciting to see all these players moving and getting re-signed.
It is. It's very exciting, and especially today when legal tampering, so that means like players and agents can start talking officially, legally, started at noon today. And so, Julian, there's been a couple big signings already, or potential signings, I should say, already happening today. Most notably, some targets that had been linked with the Colts. Safety Landon Collins, we'll start there. Collins signing for a massive deal with the Washington Redskins. I believe, I can't remember right now, but it is a massive, massive deal. I think it's 6-year, like $84 million deal. What's your thoughts on the Collins signing?
Yeah, hey, good memory, Cody. I just looked it up. Colts were linked to Collins. Collins signed a 6-year, $84 million deal with the Redskins, so you're right on the money. That is a massive deal for a safety. The interesting thing about Collins, I think the reason that he was so linked to the Colts, and Colts fans were salivating to get him over on our side, is because the fact that we passed on him in the 2015 draft. We picked Philip Dorsett instead. It's kind of like being a Pistons fan in basketball. Everybody was, Pistons fans were salty that we passed on Donovan Mitchell. Same thing with Landon Collins in the NFL. So obviously, Colts fans saw it as potential redemption, but we were just talking about this before the show, Cody. Chris Ballard, I think, has made it very clear he's not going to throw this kind of money at one player. He's not going to sign guys for 5 or 6 years. He's looking more for 2 to 4 year contracts, guys that are value, guys that fill roles and that will fit in the locker room. So not surprising to me that he didn't come to the Colts, but I'm a little surprised he went to Washington. I was actually thinking he would go to Dallas, another NFC East team.
Yeah, it did shock me. And even I wasn't surprised that he didn't go to the Colts. I was kind of actually expecting it a little bit. But yeah, like you're saying, like Washington, you kind of look at that. Like it seems like their franchise right now is kind of a mess. They don't really have a quarterback. They struggled last year, but in the end, I think it's all about that money, man.
Yeah, and I think the Redskins will move up or try to move up as far as they can in the draft. Maybe looking at a guy like Haskins, or I believe his name is Drew Lock, the Missouri quarterback, Drew. One of those guys. I think that's their approach. They did trade for Case Keenum, though, so maybe they'll just sit pat and have Keenum be their quarterback for a little bit.
Yeah, but it's still not an ideal situation, especially compared to, Dak Prescott, who's more established, obviously, and, obviously Andrew Luck, who had a great year. So that was a little bit surprising to me just on the Collins end that he would prefer money, but, that's kind of the NFL today, unfortunately. Another player that signed was – sorry, I don't have it right in front of me. Trey Flowers. Yes, Trey Flowers to the Lions, which you're actually in Detroit, so Trey Flowers is heading up your way, signing with the Detroit Lions for a massive deal as well. I know Flowers had been linked to the Colts a little bit because specifically the Colts need for a pass rusher. But I believe he signed for, I think, $17 to $18 million, which I think is actually $20 million now that I look at it, which I saw a tweet from one of my friends, Zach Carl, here on Twitter, and he says, "Let me get this straight. Trey Flowers, who had a career high of 7.5 sacks last year, is getting paid $16 million. Okay, $16 million.
Yep.
And Aaron Donald, who had 20 sacks last year, is getting $22 million. There's something about that doesn't add up to me. So I think therein lies why Flowers is a Lion and not a Colt. Chris Ballard, there's no way he's going to sign a guy like that with, he had a pretty good year with the Patriots, but 7.5 sacks, at the end of the day, I don't think it's worth that much money.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought Landon Collins coming to the Colts was like a 10% chance. I thought Trey Flowers was like less than 1%. There's no way. Like you said, Collins has upside, and he's very young. Him and I are the same age, 26. Like, he is in his prime as far as an NFL player. Trey Flowers is young as well. He's a good player. He got a few sacks last year. He's a pretty versatile guy. But listening to sports radio in Detroit, where I live, the main host, Mike Valenti, and other guys calling in to the show, they're talking about how Flowers is a good player, but he's not worth 16, 17 million in their minds. And obviously the Lions didn't agree with that, and they inked him. Looks like it's a 4-year deal. So they have signed Derek Coleman. They have signed Danny Amendola. So 3 expatriates going to the Matt Patricia, Bob Quinn regime over in Detroit, kind of like the mini Patriots being built in the NFC.
Yeah, the Detroit Patriots, kind of like similar to, I believe, when Josh McDaniels was with the Broncos. I think did he sign some Patriots players? Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. But it seems like a team has tried to do that before, and it didn't go too well for them.
Yeah, Patriots leaving New England doesn't usually actually work out in the past. And this Detroit radio host that I listen to a lot, he went through about 8 or 9 players in the past 8 years, I want to say, maybe decade, that have left New England and have not succeeded. The one exception was, I think, Richard Seymour, who went and had some pretty good years in Oakland. So,
sure.
Let these teams throw just this kind of outlandish big money at free agents. I think most Colts fans knew this is how free agency would open. Big deals being thrown out. Another one that I wanted to mention, Eric Weddle going to the Rams. That was a signing that kind of made my eyes pop out a little bit. Especially a team that, on paper, very good defensively, but they struggled giving up some yards down the middle of the field. So that could be, I think that's probably the most impactful signing that I've seen so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of seems like the Rams are kind of all in. They signed Sue last year. Obviously, he's going to be a free agent. Now they signed Weddle. So it seems like the Rams for sure are like, it's basically win now or bust.
Yeah, definitely. They understand the window of their opportunity as far as the deals and the money they have invested in their team. Cooper Kupp still on a rookie deal. Robert Woods wasn't signed to a huge deal. Whitworth coming back for another season. The Rams are definitely a team that are, firing up and getting ready for another Super Bowl run. So,
yeah, definitely. And I was just looking at going back to Landon Collins a little bit. I was looking at his contract. Of that contract, $45 million of that contract is guaranteed. I mean, that's crazy. That is a massive contract for Mr. Collins, and time will tell, obviously, if he's worth it. But I saw a post we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast, about Mike Chappell, who's basically showing compared to the Grixon and Ballard years, all the guaranteed money given to free agents by the Colts, I guess, since 2012. So yeah, and honestly, Chris Ballard, he showed 9 of the deals that was given out between Ballard and Grixon, and it was kind of telling, honestly, because only 2 of those deals, 2 of the highest guaranteed deals, were by Ballard, and they were near the low end. Jabal Sheard at $9.5 million, and then Jonathan Hankins was actually around $10 million. So I think that is very, very telling for the major difference between the two, and kind of showing like Colts fans should not be shocked at this happening. As much as a good of player as Collins is, he's not worth $45 million to Ballard. He definitely set that price, for the player he thought Collins was worth. So
yeah. I mean, money value is it's almost just as important as the player. Can you get 90% of Landon Collins for 50% of the price?
Right.
That difference in those numbers is actually really significant because of what you're investing and what you have available to put at other positions. We may want some offensive line depth. The right side of the line, it could be useful with how, Ryan Kelly got a little bit banged up, getting a center. There's needs in that regard, and the receiver position, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Mm-hmm. I think Grigson he's very careful, and he's very I think he's very deliberate about his plan and the way he wants to approach free agency. So transitioning right into that, Cody, let's talk wide receivers, because yes. I think there's going to be some guys moving around in the next few days. There are some names: John Brown, Tyrell Williams, Those are probably the two best outside receivers. You also got Adam Humphries in the slot. What do you make of this jumble? Do you think that any of these guys land in Indianapolis?
Yeah, I think it comes back to the price that Ballard sets, and if he talks to the guy and the guy wants the amount of money that he sets, I think he's going to do it. But ultimately, we were talking a little bit before, like you didn't possibly think that Williams, for example, was going to make a ton of money, but then I look and I'm like, man, this free agent wide receiver market is not that great, and so. A player like Williams, he's a good player, but I guess the question ultimately comes back to, is he worth the amount of money that he may get? Is he worth being overpaid a little bit? And I guess that's what for Ballard and company to decide. But ultimately, I think for the wide receiver market, this is just my random guess, I think Williams gets overpaid, and I think the Colts if they sign anybody, if they don't just draft people, I think they sign a guy who's a little bit under the radar, so maybe a Humphries, depending on what he demands. A name that's been mentioned is Golden Tate. I think he could be a potential. I know he's getting up there in age, but I mean he's been a consistent guy, not really a diva. And he's been consistent. He plays a little bit bigger, I think, than his height. So I think that's a potential guy as well. And John Brown, I mean that could be a guy that you kind of take a low risk, high reward contract with, depending on what he's asking. So ultimately, I think. It comes back to what Ballard has to say, and I know that I'm trying not to avoid your question, but if it was up to me, or if I had to guess for what Ballard was going to do, I would probably say that he would find a guy who's a little bit more under the radar. But who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. And our wide receiver position is in flux. We'll talk about the draft in a bit, but there are 5 or 6 very clear receivers coming out of college that I think are going to be elite receivers in this league. Maybe not like the top of the elite, like Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, that level, but guys that are going to be contributing. And we'll probably have an opportunity to take one of those guys. So if we re-sign Inman, because he mentioned in a tweet that I saw a few weeks ago that he'd like to stay with Indianapolis. He'd like to his career with the Colts.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the Jim Irsay tweet, I think last week. He was basically, Jim Irsay is well known for over-exaggerating on Twitter, but he was basically saying something along the lines of Dontrell made some Reggie Wayne-type catches last year, which I think would bode well for Inman coming back, but, who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that is a big factor. Deion Kane's health is another factor. So all those things are in flux, but Tyrell Williams, I'd say maybe 20-25% chance. A team like Jacksonville or Buffalo that really needs receiver help, especially with Dante Moncrief probably leaving Jacksonville. Teams like those, they might throw a 4-year, maybe $14 million per year deal at Tyrell Williams, and Ballard just won't be offering that. Ballard will probably be going for a contract similar to what Eric Ebron got. And Eric Ebron and Tyrell Williams, kind of similar as far as being obviously talented offensive pieces. Ebron had issues with drops in Detroit. Tyrell Williams was really just a specialist with the Chargers. He was their deep ball guy, whereas Keenan Allen and, the running backs out of the backfield and Mike Williams kind of worked more the middle of the field in the red zone. But just like Ebron, maybe Ballard will see the opportunity to unleash more of this player's potential.
Absolutely.
Williams. So, I think it would be a great signing, but it's not going to be any more than 3 years. So.
Absolutely. And going back to that point about some of the teams who are really desperate for wide receivers. I mean, you were going back to Jacksonville. I mean, look what they paid Dante Moncrief last year. I mean,
$14 million for a year?
Yeah, that's crazy. So I definitely wouldn't I don't know how much cap space Jacksonville has because I think they spend a lot of it. But, a team like Jacksonville is just desperate for a playmaker. I could definitely see them overpaying for a player like Williams.
Yep. And speaking of Jacksonville, real quick, another signing we forgot about, Malik Jackson leaving Jacksonville, which is great for us. He goes to the NFC and is signing with the Eagles for a 3-year deal.
Man, how about that D-line, though?
Yeah.
You got Graham. You got, what was his name? He was drafted a couple years ago by the Eagles, pass rusher. His name is escaping me right now.
I always call him one of the most underrated defensive players in the 97. He's
Derek Barnett. There it is.
There you go.
Yep. Yeah, Derek Barnett, and then you got Fletcher Cox, and now Mr. Jackson. I mean, that is a lethal defensive front for sure.
Yeah, Philadelphia is going to be a dangerous team. The NFC, I think, is going to take a step forward, whereas they kind of had a shaky year last year as a conference. I think they're going to take a step forward this year, and I think we'll be glad that we're in the AFC a little bit more next season.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to looking at wide receivers, I think the Colts have 3 picks within the top 60. So I think even if you do sign a receiver, and you re-sign Inman, I think at best, as good as Dontrell Inman was, he's 30, 31. I think you've got to address the wide receiver position with one of those 3 picks, 26, 34, 59. I think the Colts, even if they do sign a wide receiver, they have to address that position because ultimately it's kind of a Band-Aid fix, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking through this list that I was peeking at last night. N'Keal Harry is kind of his stock is rising. I think he will go earlier in the draft. He may go to a team like Miami or Green Bay or Baltimore, if he falls to that. These are all teams that I think will be looking to address the wide receiver position early. The guy I'm really hoping for, so I guess we can talk a little bit draft now because it seems like we're snowballing in that direction.
Sure.
The guy I'm really hoping that we take is A.J. Brown. He is a wide receiver out of, I believe it's Mississippi State. 6'1", 220. I watched his highlights. He seems just like a natural receiver. Seems like some guys have to try really hard, when you watch their tape. This guy just seems like an absolute natural. Has all the physical specimens you'd want. And, his combine was strong. Just seems like it'd be a really great fit. So, yeah, like you said, we have 3 picks pretty early in the draft. So you'd imagine one of those would be invested in the wide receiver position. And early on, I really like A.J. Brown.
Yeah, a little bit of breaking news here. Jamison Crowder, a wide receiver, former Washington wide receiver, he actually just got signed. So that takes one wide receiver off of the market. And so that might set the market a little bit more for, slot receivers like Adam Humphries or whatever. So, yeah, just keeping that in mind.
Yeah. Oh, did he re-sign with Washington?
No, he signed actually with New York, with the Jets.
With the Jets, yeah. See, the Jets will be spending quite a bit this free agency. There's talks of them being linked to C.J. Mosley. I don't know if it's official that Mosley re-signed with Baltimore, but I know they were pursuing him. Yeah, and also Le'Veon Bell, they've been linked to him. So the Jets have some money to work with. I think they're second in the NFL only to the Colts, so that's something to keep in mind. Now, let's talk Le'Veon Bell real quick.
For sure.
I was scrolling through Twitter. I went through probably about 110 tweets. There were a few beat reporters for the Colts and NFL Network as well, linking Le'Veon Bell to the Colts potentially. So it seems like there's just a little bit of energy going towards that. Obviously, I don't think either of us would go out and plant a flag in the fact that he would sign with the Colts. But what do you make of all this? It seems like for the right price, the Colts would consider Bell. He's tweeted a lot of positive things, especially towards Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton. So what do you make of all that? Yeah, we were talking a little bit earlier. I think, the Colts have the most cap space in the NFL. Ultimately, I think the Colts are going to probably get linked to just about every big-name free agent out there. Sure. Especially with looking at their needs. Somebody looks at their needs, they're like, oh, the Colts maybe need a running back. Oh, Le'Veon Bell's here. Oh, the Colts have the most cap space in the NFL. It makes logical sense. And I think unfortunately what the national media does is they look at that and they don't look at the tendencies of Chris Ballard and look at that wouldn't make really much sense unless the price was right. Unless for some weird reason Le'Veon Bell is willing to sign for a lot cheaper probably than he's asking. I just don't see it happening. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd put it like a 5% chance, just like shot in the dark kind of thing. But the one thing that's different about this situation is that Bell seems to want to go to the Colts. Right. But he probably still wants that, big elite running back money. And the Colts just won't pay it because Marlon Mack is pretty good. And the O-line is extremely strong. just spitballing, Bell would absolutely demolish. Having Bell and Mack and Hines would be ridiculous with this offensive line and, Reich's system. But comes down to price. Always comes down to price.
Yeah, and I think the Colts, they like Marlon Mack a lot, and I think that's one thing you have to consider as well. They like their running backs as they have them now. So I don't think for Chris Ballard and company, they necessarily think that a player as good as Bell is, I don't think they see running back as a position that they need to invest that much money in.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, the top needs, like we were talking about, edge rusher and wide receiver are pretty far and away the biggest needs. And then the secondary, maybe a little bit of offensive line depth beyond that. But it just seems like Ballard is going to build the front line. He always talks about the trenches. That's like his go-to word. To win the battles up front. I mean, I think he verbatim has said that in almost every interview when he's asked about his approach to spending money to drafting. He always says you have to win the battles up front. So getting guys that can rush the passer, that can play on the line on either side of the ball is still going to be a huge thing for Ballard. So
yeah, for sure. Well, I guess we can move on now to kind of some of the Colts who have their in-house free agents, maybe looking at some of those guys. I think there's 3 big guys that the Colts could potentially bring back that would definitely help this team.
Yeah, we already re-signed Marcus Hunt, which was good. Very happy to see that. Definitely threw out a fist pump when I saw that on my timeline a few days ago.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, you've got, I imagine the 3 you're thinking of, you got Pierre Desir, Clayton Gathers, and the third would be
Dontrell Inman.
Of course, just mentioned him. Yep. I imagine we re-signed 2 of the 3. I just don't really have a clear idea which 2 it'll be.
Yeah, I guess we can make a random guess here. I would definitely think the Colts would bring back Desir and Inman.
Yep, that was going to be my exact guess as well.
But it's also hard because Chris Ballard has just talked so much about how he loves Clayton Gathers, so I could definitely see them honestly bringing back all 3. It's just a guessing game at this point, but I think the idea behind this is he wants to let them test the market, kind of see what they'd be worth, and see if they're worth more than what he wants, what the set price he has. I think he ultimately will let them walk. I mean, we saw it last year with Rashawn Melvin. I mean, I think fans were a little up in arms when Ballard let Melvin walk and sign with the Raiders last year, but ultimately we see it worked out for the best, and Ballard knew what he was doing there. And I think he'll approach it the same exact way as he did last year. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think ultimately Chris Ballard he just has certain verbiage ideas that he always comes back to. And I think you're looking at a pretty similar approach, just different positions. Last year was Nelson and then Darius Leonard and then another offensive lineman, because obviously the offensive line was a position of need. Now the offensive line is much more secure, especially if Ryan Kelly can stay healthy. So now we're looking at, this is the perfect draft for us to target pass rushers and wide receivers. Many scouts and experts have said that these are the 2 richest positions in this draft. Wide receiver and edge rusher are deep. Some people say 8 or 9 edge rushers could go in the first round.
Wow.
So that would be huge. But really, I think the fine tooth comb question here is: would you rather the Colts pick a wide receiver in the first round or an edge rusher? Do you really have a preference, or is it kind of best player available in your mind?
I do have a preference, and I think Chris Ballard has a preference as well. So before I give my answer, I just want to kind of give an idea of the drafts that Chris Ballard's been a part of outside of Indianapolis. So I think he's been with the Bears. He's also been with the Chiefs. And I think out of all those times, all those drafts that he's been through, I think they've only spent one time during his tenure in those 2 places. They spent a first-round pick on a wide receiver. I think that was Alshon Jeffrey. So I think thinking about that, I think Ballard, and I think he's right in saying this, I think pass rusher is definitely more of a need for the Colts, especially since the Colts had Inman last year, and it seems like there's some free agents available. And you're talking about just how deep this class is for wide receivers. I think the Colts could definitely definitely would, if they had the choice between the two. Say there's two prospects who have the same grade on their board. I think the Colts would definitely go pass rusher in that instance.
And I also think there's a high possibility the Colts go pass rusher and then pick an interior lineman.
Oh, absolutely.
A defensive lineman with the first pick of the second round, and then wait until the back half of the second round with our natural pick, because the early second round pick, of course, we got from the Jets. But with our pick in the second round, then we wait and see what receivers are available.
Exactly, and with how good Chris Ballard showed last year he is at drafting, I mean, heck, he got Nyheim Hines in the 4th round, got Jordan Wilkins in, I think the 5th round, and Deion Kane in the 6th round. So it's like this guy could find talent. And just talking about how deep this wide receiver class is, I mean, I think that Ballard could probably find a diamond in the rough in the 3rd to 4th round.
Definitely. I think the only situation where we do pick, like I said, I really like A.J. Brown, where we're looking at that level of guy like Marquise Brown, DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, whoever is available from that crop. The only situation where we really would look at that in the 1st round or with that early pick in the 2nd is if we don't sign Williams or Humphreys or any of those guys and Inman leaves as well. That would be a little bit of a glaring hole. But I think if we re-sign Inman, just that alone would probably push receiver to more of a 2nd, 3rd round priority. So.
For sure. But I'm also can't ignore the Frank Reich comment about he wants to get he called it another dog to go along with T.Y. Hilton. So he wants another guy like Hilton who can take over games. And so that's why I wouldn't rule it out in the 1st or 2nd round for sure, because the Colts know that wide receiver is definitely a position they need to address. I guess it depends on whether they want to feel comfortable doing that in free agency or the draft. I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, and you know what? To be honest, I would rather they do it through the draft.
Yes.
A guy like A.J. Brown, a guy like Marquise Brown, Oklahoma. These players are really exciting to me. And I've watched their tape. And a few guys beyond that, the draft is always tough. I'm sure you commiserate with this, Cody. Keeping up with all these names. I'm already pretty bad with names as it goes in my everyday life. All these receivers, these edge rushers, and these offensive linemen. But there are a few guys beyond that. I would rather see us get one of these young, really promising receivers in the draft rather than ink, a 3-year deal with a guy like John Brown or Tyrell Williams. So. For
sure. Another guy I think that could be good in maybe the 2nd or 3rd round would be Jose. I can't pronounce it, but Arcega-Whiteside from Stanford.
Stanford. That's one of the guys I was forgetting. Thank you.
He's 6'3", 210. I don't think he has blazing speed, but I think this guy is a big body guy.
Hands.
Has good hands. I didn't watch Stanford much this year, but from what I've heard, he has good hands. Good size. Be the perfect complement to T.Y. Hilton, and you wouldn't have to probably burn a 1st rounder on him either.
No, back half of the 2nd. That is exactly the guy that I want. Yeah, because all the guys like A.J. Brown, Marquise Brown, Metcalf, they'll definitely be gone by then. Then you're looking at the next tier, and I watched some of his highlights about a week ago. I saw him mentioned by a Colts beat writer, and the dude can play. His vertical, his point of attack, his hands are super solid. Like you said, not blowing you away with speed, but we have Nyheim Hines and T.Y. Hilton. We have plenty of speed that we can attack people with. This guy is just more of a bruiser. Seems to be a pretty good route runner, and he plays in a pro style offense at Stanford. That's why Stanford players usually make such a smooth transition into the NFL.
Yeah, definitely. What other positions do you think that the Colts should address in the draft?
I think getting a versatile offensive lineman in maybe the 4th round that can play center and maybe right guard, somebody we can develop would be good. Just because Ryan Kelly still missed a few games last year, kind of that 6th offensive lineman, if you will, that may be somebody that we're looking at this year. The starters are set, between Costanzo, Quinton, Glowinski, Kelly, and Braden Smith. But beyond that, there seems to be some pretty good offensive talent. And another position I wanted to talk about is tight end. There's been a few tight ends that we've met with that we've worked out. What are your thoughts on this? Because this is actually a really good tight end draft as well.
Oh, exactly. That's why I think the Colts could definitely use another tight end, for competition's sake. And also, like, you look at it, Jack Doyle, he's getting near 30, just had hip surgery. So the Colts hope he'll be back, and they think he'll be back for training camp and stuff. But, I mean, you just never know with injuries. Eric Ebron, for the great year he had, I mean, he had unfortunately, he had some drops still. But, he got better, obviously, but still had some drops. So you kind of worry about that a little bit, maybe. Mo Alley Cox, I think, had a pretty decent season. I think he had a better season than he had ever had before. So it looks like he's trending up, but you never really know. Ross Travis was injured last year. He got re-signed, obviously, early on in the offseason. But I think a lot of these guys is kind of unknown. And then you got Ryan Hewitt as well, who's more of a blocking guy. So I definitely think adding another guy, do-it-all guy would definitely – I would not be opposed to that because I think, you can never have too many players at one position, too much competition. So I think as good as this draft class is, like you're saying, I think the Colts, they could definitely do that, and they should do that. They should pursue that.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine 3 of our first 4 picks will be defense, and the one probably wide receiver. I really think that our Sega Whiteside guy, I think that's the most likely receiver to be drafted by the Colts. So, but I still think 3 of our first 4 picks, that's 2 in the second round, 1 in the first, 1 in the third. I think those will go to defense. But once we hit rounds 4 and 5, I definitely think we'll be looking at tight end. So yeah, I agree. I'd love to see us pick a guy that we think would fit and maybe be the heir apparent to Jack Doyle, who, like you said, has been banged up recently. So, but yeah, I think that's about it for the draft. We are still, what would it be, 39 days away from the NFL draft?
I don't know. Let me check real fast. I think it's the 26th and 27th of, or no, wait, 25th, 26th, and 27th of April. There's 3 days. Yeah, that's exciting, man.
Yeah, so we're about, a little over 40 days out. So, it's coming up. Free agency is going to hit first. I guess we're going to see who lands and who sticks with the Colts. But, it's those 3 guys we talked about, Inman, Geathers, Desir. Those are the big ones to keep an eye on as far as our in-house guys. And, beyond that, the receivers that we talked about, Tyrann Mathieu, a couple other names that have been linked to the Colts. We'll just have to see what Ballard does in the next week. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think one guy that, since obviously the Colts didn't land Landon Collins, I think another guy that could potentially be good for the Colts is former Chicago Bears safety Adrian Amos. I think he's a pretty young guy. He was a pretty – let me check real fast on Amos, but I think he's like 24, 25, so he's still fairly young. I think Pro Football Focus had him, I'm not the hugest fan of Pro Football Focus, but they had him as a very good safety, very well graded. I think the number 8th safety in the NFL. He's 25. He's almost 26. He'll turn 26 at the end of April. But I think that's another guy, another under-the-radar guy that Ballard could sign for sure. And also, so some breaking news I just saw on Twitter. One of the safeties is off the market. That's Kenny Vaccaro. He's signing with the Titans. I don't remember. Was he with the Titans already?
Kenny Vaccaro.
I can't remember who he was with. But anyways, he signed a 4-year deal worth $26 million with the Titans. I think that's a lot. That's a lot of money. But
back again, what'd you say? What? How many years?
4-year, $26 million, 11.5 in guarantees.
Yeah, 4-year. Yeah, that's
a pretty good chunk.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid deal. Kenny Vaccaro. Just read the update. What team was he on before? I feel like
he was on the Titans. I don't remember.
Yeah, I think he was. But yeah, and then Tyrann Mathieu. So like this is a big class. We haven't even talked about the Texans. Jadeveon Clowney probably going to get franchise tag. He denied the contract extension that they offered him.
Oh, did he?
Deny it, yeah. But apparently, I saw something. I probably should have looked. Okay, so Vaccaro was drafted by the Saints.
Yes.
In 2013 draft.
Yes, I believe he signed a 1-year prove-it deal with the Titans last year and then got a 4-year extension.
Yep, I think that's the case. Yep. So, so Jadeveon Clowney, let me just get like a more crisp update on this, but I think he is he didn't deny it, but he didn't he didn't really start negotiating on a new deal with the Texans. So the speculation is that they're going to franchise tag him. But as a Colts fan, that's some interesting news. So.
Yeah, and did you also see Frank Clark from the Seahawks? He wouldn't sign his franchise tag tender, so that's interesting.
Yeah,
I think I saw. I don't know how truthful this is, but I think I saw a rumor that like the Colts would maybe be interested in trading for Clark if the Seahawks were open to it. I don't know if there's any validity to that, but that could be an interesting option. I think
That's a very good option.
Clark's 25. Good pass rusher.
That's a huge option to me. That would be very appealing, more appealing than Bell or any of the other free agents that we talked about. And, of course, Antonio Brown traded to the Raiders for a third and a fifth.
Man, that money, though, that money that the Raiders have to absorb is crazy.
And they just signed Trent Brown, too, left tackle. So
yeah. And I heard that they may be in on Le'Veon Bell as well.
Oh, yeah. That would be hilarious. They do have a good amount of cap space, though. I just saw them update. The Colts, officially, no surprise, have the highest cap space in the NFL.
Oh, yeah. I think they're like 101, 102 million.
Yeah, 101.9, I think I saw.
Wow.
Something, yeah.
Okay, so, an update on the Crowder news. 3-year, $28.5 million with $17 million fully guaranteed. Wow.
For the Jets.
For the Jets, yep.
It's a position of need. Get some safe, reliable hands for a young QB. Although the offensive coordinator they brought in is, I was listening to a fantasy football podcast talking about him. They were not impressed. Adam Gase is the new coach of the Jets, the guy that he brought along with them. At least from a fantasy perspective, they're kind of getting ripped for that move. But I think Darnold's pretty good. You got Robbie Anderson there now.
Yeah.
And you've got Jamison Crowder, so you at least have a foundation, and with Chris Herndon at tight end, I am rooting for Darnold. I like the guy. I like a lot of the QBs from the last class: Josh Allen, Sam Darnold.
Yeah, what do you make of the Josh Rosen debacle news potentially?
That is going to be. I mean, I share a last name with him. I joke around that he's my cousin sometimes. I think that's going to be a huge, kind of hot button topic for the next month. And change, because it's going to lead all the way into the draft. So there's some speculation that the Cardinals are doing this to increase the value of Kyler Murray and of the first pick. There's talks, that the Cardinals plan to draft Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
Teams are already calling about Josh Rosen. Teams like Miami, teams like the Giants, etc. I think ultimately, they're going to trade the pick. Move back and try to stockpile some picks, kind of like what the Colts did last year.
Yeah,
but they have the number one pick. It's incredibly valuable, and I'm not sure that Kyler Murray will end up going number one. It's kind of interesting, Cody. I'm sure you've noticed this, how things change so drastically sometimes in the weeks leading up to the draft.
Yeah,
I mean. At this time last year, we didn't think Denzel Ward would be going top 5 in the NFL.
Or Baker Mayfield going 1. I mean, it's crazy.
Still going 1, yeah. So things change. There are some heavy hitters at the top. This year, there's not a clear and away running back. That's the difference. The last 3 years, you've had Elliott, Fournette, and Barkley. Definitely. From the start, everyone knew they would be top 6 picks, but there's not really that kind of running back, so it changes the landscape of this class. And, a guy like Drew Lock, a guy like Haskins could jump Kyler Murray as far as being the QB that teams are attacking and going after, just like Baker Mayfield last year. So
yeah,
we'll have to see. I think Rosen, with a better offensive line and a couple more weapons, I think he could be a solid QB. That offensive system last year was horrendous.
Oh, man.
Their play calling and their play selection with McCoy and Wilkes was really bad. Yeah. So I kind of mulligan his rookie season just a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
And I think he's going to work really hard to silence the naysayers. Maybe he has a little more motivation in this offseason to get things right. So we'll have to see. But the Cardinals are going to be a hot topic, probably the most talked about team in the next month.
Yeah. Funny story. One of my friends last year, when we played fantasy football, he drafted David Johnson, I think like 3rd or 4th overall, and he was so mad. He was so mad when the Cardinals just did not use him for a lot of the season. I mean, definitely. I definitely am a fan of Rosen. I think that he can be a good quarterback if given the right system, given pieces around him. I think he can be a really good quarterback. So,
yeah, I think he would be a solid, like maybe third-tier QB, not like Pro Bowl level, but in that kind of Derek Carr, Matt Stafford range. I think that's probably his ceiling. Maybe like Matt Ryan. Those are some of the comparisons when he came into the league. And he's definitely got the intellect, spoken up and really, really studying this offense if he is the quarterback. Because Cliff Kingsbury, people talk about, his record wasn't good. But their defenses weren't good, and his responsibility was on offense. And the offenses that Cliff Kingsbury had in his college tenure were prolific. I mean, they were high scoring. It was an air raid offense. And that's what he's going to be running in Arizona. So I think if things click up, they could be headed in the right direction. And maybe the Cardinals, we've talked so much about how good the receivers are in this class. Maybe they want to trade back and pick a guy like DK Metcalf or N'Keal Harry.
Yeah.
Maybe that's their approach. And pair him up with Christian Kirk, one more season, maybe two from Larry Fitzgerald to kind of set the tone for the receiver group, and introduce a new offensive system with these weapons and see what Rosen can do.
Yeah, we shall see. It's definitely going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, the Cardinals have always been my favorite NFC team. Because I love Bruce Arians, as I'm sure all Colts fans do. So I always kind of rooted for them on the NFC side of the bracket. But, the draft is heating up, man. I'm super excited for it. I know you are too. I know Colts fans are really excited to see what we do at 26. Seems like pass rusher, defensive lineman is the most likely outcome. So
yeah, man. What are your draft plans? I'm just curious.
I usually work on Thursdays, so maybe request it off. I was working last year. I was texting with my good friend Tim, who's a Colts fan. He's the only Colts fan I knew going to school in Virginia. Obviously, mostly Redskins and Panthers and Steelers fans at our college. So we were like the lone Colts fans. He texted me and said that we picked Quentin Nelson. I was at work. I remember just kind of fist bumping and clapping a little bit and smiling. So that was cool. But at the same time, I really would like to watch the draft this year. So I'm probably going to request it off. Maybe get a couple friends together. Most of my friends here are Lions fans, so I know they're excited. They have a top 10 pick, just like we did last year. So maybe I'll get a bunch of guys together and watch the draft and crack a few cold ones and see who the Colts pick later in the draft. What about you?
Yeah, so I'll be able to watch the Thursday night one, but unfortunately, I guess I shouldn't say unfortunately, but a little bit about me. I work as a youth pastor in Northern Indiana. And so we actually have an event coming that weekend, that Friday and Saturday. So I don't know how much of the draft I'll be able to watch as far as like the rest of the rounds, but it's exciting. I mean, I can still get updates. And, this time last year, though, I actually disappeared for 3 days. It was hilarious. I just kind of just got in my room, watched, turned on the TV and just kind of sat in there and watched the draft. It was a really cool experience, but for this year I won't be able to do that, but that's okay. I love what I do, and so I'm just excited because the Colts have ammunition this year, similar to last year. So, yeah, man.
Yeah, 4 more picks in the first 3 rounds. I mean, this is just continuing to build that contender culture, where we could be a top 3 team in the AFC perennially. And Colin Cowherd, I think I sent you that video. He is like a huge Colts fan, quietly.
Yeah.
He says that we're going to be the NFL's dynasty, at least on the AFC side, of the next decade, of 2020 to 2029.
Let's hope so. I think there's definitely a lot of Kansas City, Indianapolis playoff games in the near future. I'm excited for those.
Definitely, yeah. We're going to be seeing Pat Mahomes and Tyreek and those guys quite a bit. We're going to have to get used to it. And the idea is that we're going to be a little more equipped, a little more explosive, and a little more talented the next time that we face Kansas City. We are playing them in the regular season this year.
Ooh.
But, more importantly, down the stretch if we see them in the playoffs in January. So,
dude, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to it, man. So I think, Julian, what we're going to do for the next podcast, I think – I don't know if, sometimes it's like our schedules are a little bit different, and we apologize to people who haven't heard us for a while. It's been kind of crazy, I know, for me. But I think what we should do is definitely have another podcast pretty soon, just kind of talking about the players that the Colts do sign, kind of talking about what their roles can be and kind of looking at that a little bit more. And then definitely have another podcast. Maybe I'll get some of the local indie writers on to talk a little bit about the Colts when the draft gets near. So, yeah, that's kind of what I think. What do you think about it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, something looking at the draft. Once free agency has closed and the dust is settled, we'll have an even clearer idea of what the Colts are going to be doing in the draft. Maybe we pull off this deal with Frank Clark. Who knows? That would change our draft needs drastically. Maybe we do look at a guy like A.J. Brown in the first round instead. Maybe we look tight end in the first round. That's not out of the question. This is a very strong tight end class. So, yeah, I think next one, looking at the draft and, getting excited for that late April frenzy, with, like we said, 4 picks in the first 3 rounds. And then beyond that, it's going to be, talking about the roster, talking about the final 53-man roster, and, OTAs and whatnot. So,
yeah. One more thing. I know I've done a couple breaking news on this podcast, but Nick Foles signed with the Jaguars officially. So we'll see him 2 times a year.
Yep, yeah, Nick Foles definitely an upgrade over Bortles. How much of an upgrade, we will have to wait and see. I think Bortles is like a 5 out of 10 at QB, and Foles is like 6.5, 7, so he's solid. But they do have some pretty interesting young players, D.D. Westbrook, DJ Shark, and Keelan Cole. So they have some weapons there. Yeah, we'll see if they can turn it around because they had a pretty disastrous 2018 season.
Yeah, we shall see. It'll be definitely a good season coming up in 2019. So thanks, Julian, as always. Thank you guys for listening. Hope to get more podcasts in very soon. So, yeah, have a good night, guys.
Yeah, take care.